What with kickboxing? Like, I mean, I'm not really familiar with where you even watch kickboxing.
Glory, you got to go to the Glory has most of their shows are on the web, and you could go to I think it's fight. I think it's FITE.com is where, or it's glorykickboxing.com, and there's a link to it, and you could stream it. No, what I usually do is I get it on my phone, and then I use the Apple app, and I stream it to my television through Apple TV.
Does that mean that there's not like a ton of money for kickboxing?
There's not as much money in kickboxing. No. Glory is the biggest organization for kickboxing in the world, and they put on phenomenal fights, and I'm a giant fan of the organization. But it's weird to me that boxing got so popular in the United States and around the world, and MMA got so popular in the United States and around the world, but kickboxing never really caught on here. It doesn't make any sense because it's so exciting. When you watch guys that are like high level, like Cedric Doumbé or Alex Pereira or Vahitov, these fucking world-class kickboxers are so exciting. It's not like a bad product. The product is sensational.
What we see people dying in boxing, and we don't see people dying in MMA.
Knock on wood.
Right. I have a theory about that. That it's about the gloves, because like if you take football, back in the day when they had like just the little leather helmet, like back then, like people wouldn't hit their head so much because they had like a little fucking leather helmet on. So like but then now in modern football, you've got this crazy helmet that lets you bash your head around with seeming impunity. And because of that, people are hitting their heads so much more, and as a result, they've got all this CTE going on.
Well, that's a real theory shared by other people as well. Yeah.
So yeah, with boxing, these humongous gloves, it's like, oh, you can, throw your fists around with impunity, but then that's why.
Yeah, well, it's there's a lot of thought to that. It's also there's only one option. That option is to punch. Like you can't clinch, you can't take people down, you can't kick and stay on the outside. You have to stay inside a boxing range because that's the only sport you're playing. There's a lot of thought to that about the big gloves too. Is that there's a lot more thudding,
right?
And the thing that people don't understand about head injuries is that, like CTE in particular, you don't have to get knocked unconscious to get it.
Right.
It's repeated small blows can give you CTE. In fact, there's some soccer players that get CTE.
Right. When I think about that, way back when, before I got sober, I had this tour. It was called the Don't Try This at Home tour, and I would promote every show by saying, I will be drunk and on drugs or your money back. And I'm in it. And you watched me
What year was this?
That it started in 2001, and I ran that till like 2005. And I mean, you would just watch me get completely hammered on stage, like pounding tequila and shit. When I came out on stage, I would walk out with like a suitcase of Budweiser cans, and I'd toss them out of the crowd, and I would take the can. I would start out with one, and I would just bash my head with it until the can exploded. And I'd be particularly proud if the can broke into two separate pieces. And after I broke the one can, then I would take out two cans, one in each hand, and go back and forth, ba 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 ba, and break both of them. So every show I would break 3 beers over my head, and I would do that like every night.
Oh my God.
And that, like what I understand about the CTE phenomenon is that you're absolutely right. It's not about how hard you get hit. It's the accumulation of lots of little hits, and that's why football is the biggest.
Did you suffer anything from that?
The worst part was then like after I got sober, I started doing stand up. Like initially, there was a period where I would do it with sparkling water cans.
Like and you were doing it still? You were still beating yourself in the head?
I did it for a little while. How
many times do you think you've beaten yourself in the head? How many shows? If you had to count them all up.
Hundreds.
Hundreds. Oh, my God.
Right. And I mean, as far as I can tell, I'm in pretty good shape. Tony Hawk told me one time, he says that he found out with regard to CTE that there's a gene which will make you predisposed to Alzheimer's disease.
APOE4. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you have that gene, then you're very much at risk for CTE. But if you don't have that gene, you're considerably less at risk. And he said that when he found that out, he went and got the test and determined that he did not have that gene. And when I heard that, like, I kind of chewed on it for a while. I ended up like it was kind of nagging at me, and I ended up like reaching back out to Tony. I said, "Hey, Tony, about that test, like, what was your plan if you did have the gene? You can't unhit yourself in the head,
right?
You know." And he's like, "Oh, well, I didn't have a plan." I'm like,
well, how can you have a plan after the fact?
Right, exactly. But so I'm like, I don't want to fucking go take that test. I don't want to know if I have that goddamn gene or not.
Well, if it's been this many years afterwards, you're not suffering, you probably don't have that gene.
I also went to, like, and now, of course, famously, the whole CTE phenomenon, you can't find out if you have it until you've died and they've, like,
I think they can tell now.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I think there's a new way that they can tell before you die. But it used to be that they had to wait and do an autopsy on you.
Right. Well, I went to some, like, brain specialist kind of guy.
Were you having problems?
No. I just went because I was interested. And Dr. Drew sent me to this guy. It was actually